resource handbook. And she got here, okay. Karen is in the back and doesn't want to. Okay, thank you, Karen. Okay, glad you got here. You look like you want to say something. I want to say something to you too. All right, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Arnold, for setting up this project, and thank you, Rochelle, particularly for bringing women to the forefront in it. We know that so many of the stories of women have been buried and need to be excavated. And we also know that so many women artists have not really had their say and have not really been heard. I know there are several other women playwrights and artists here. If you guys could just raise your hands. Barbara Kahn, Jessica, Linda Stein. Are you a performer? Well, anyhow, I think, you know, that women have been underrepresented in the arts, and they are still. The latest studies in theater show that 24% of the new plays that are produced are by women, and similar statistics in visual arts and in music composition. So to actually make that effort to make sure that women's voices are included, to me, is remarkable. So I just want to thank you for that.
And I wanted to thank you for making my voice one of the voices in this premiere, this world premiere of Cindy's play that we saw tonight. And Jessica, one of the performers, actually is a playwright as well, and one of her plays, Promised Land, is in our resource handbook.
There is no name on the. You were so kind to let me do this without asking to see it.
I didn't even know what was going on exactly, although you were kind of asking me an awful lot of questions.
but it's there is no actual name.
No.
No, but there's not like, you know, Sally or Joan or Rochelle. It's the character is called A Woman of Substance. And I know how hard it is to have someone chronicle your own story, because Michael Simonson, that's standing back there, works at the Leo Beck Institute. He wrote a story about my family, my mother's family in Dawson, Minnesota, and it was definitely odd to see someone else writing about my family. They were the only Jewish family to have ever lived there, apparently. So he wrote, it's a full-page article in the Dawson, Minnesota newspaper.
Where strangely we're both from, it's so bizarre.
Anything you'd like to say, either of you? And then we're going to see the group, and then we'll ask the audience.
So first of all, thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. There are a few things that I wanted to say about the piece, having not been able to really introduce it, which is you saw part of the beginning, and then we skipped and sort of like condensed into one monologue about 50 minutes, and then wound up sort of at the penultimate song, which is really the point of the whole show. Part of the reason that I love performing this piece, and I'm so grateful to be able to do so, is because my grandparents' stories, the stories of the partisans, is not one that is told as frequently, and it is a story that people generally, I find, have not heard or are surprised to hear. And you know, maybe they've heard a little bit about maybe the Italian resistance, or they've heard a little bit about, you know, the Russian units. And when the film Defiance came out a few years back, which was a big Hollywood blockbuster, that really spoke to the Bielski unit, which was a completely Jewish unit that my grandmother, in fact, wound up being in at the end of the war. And when that film came out, what I found was that so many people in my life, friends that I had grown up with at summer camp, and I told everybody they had to watch the film, because that's what I've been telling you forever, that's what my grandparents did. And they came up to me and they said, you know, like when we were kids, I thought like they lived in a tent, like didn't get it. Like, they lived in the woods. Like, what it, you know, and it is really confusing. And it's confusing as a kid when you grow up learning these stories. Like, what are you talking about? You lived in the woods. And so, you know, one of the really important messages that I like to get across is that, you know, 30,000 Jews walked out of those woods at the end of the Holocaust. It was not nearly enough, but it was, in fact, 30,000, which is a huge number. And also that women, there's an incredible organization called Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation that I'm a part of, and they have incredible information, videos, stories. If anybody here is an educator, teacher, full curriculum available on their website, all free, all about the partisans, and huge amounts of information about women. And women in the partisans and the role that women played. And the other thing that I just want to say really quickly is that my Bubby and Zaidi were both, my grandfather was in a Russian partisan unit called Iskra. My grandmother was in the Rishchinsky unit, and then she wound up in the Bielsky unit. But they both always told me, and it was really important for them to tell me, and so I feel that it is really important for me to tell you, that they never ever thought of themselves as any better or as any bit of a hero or any stronger than anyone who was in a camp or anyone who was anywhere else during the war. And they felt that, in fact, they were given a moment of opportunity to run. And they did. And they feel certain that most people were never given that moment and that opportunity. And so they do not see what they did as heroic, though I certainly do. But I also really understand and appreciate the perspective of no one who suffered anything in the Holocaust was any different than any other person. It was circumstance, and I think that has a lot to do with the shame that was spoken about in the first piece. The shame of survivors, and actually in the second piece as well. That my grandparents always felt, there was a little bit more pride in our family because my grandparents were fighters, but they also carried with them a tremendous amount of guilt. And to work in the work that I do as a cantor, and a lot of the work that I do in volunteering and speaking to, lots of Holocaust education, that there is unfortunately a real shame and real guilt that seems to be associated with camp survivors versus the guilt of surviving that comes with being, in the partisans. And my grandparents were always just very clear on the fact that there was no delineation and no distinction whatsoever between them.
No, I would just thank you again for this really important opportunity to share new work that's being done throughout New York, throughout the nation, and opportunities, I think, also for young people to experience what those who came before them endured. I think that's tremendously important.
That's why I think it's so important what you're doing with your students, the students you brought this year and the students that did the Tillion play 2 years ago. It's super important to have these young people that probably don't have so much background knowing about the Holocaust to be able to learn and to empathize by playing these roles. We have some refreshments outside, and it's getting late. Does anybody have any burning issue that they have to? Yes.
I just want to say that two things. That thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be in this room. I'm leaving very early in the morning to go work in Central and Eastern Europe to teach and perform in direct theater, and it's one of the places where I experience a great deal of anti-Semitism still, and I just realize how wonderful it is to be in this room and with all of you, and thank you so much. I did a lot of research for my last play and my dissertation. Here, The Promised Land is about the Bielsky unit, so if you want to look it up, the resource book was done and commissioned by the National Jewish Federation of Culture, and we did it in Budapest, and it was really the family Bielskis got to see it. And I just want to say
how we could collaborate as organizations, but how what we're talking about doing here is starting to become part of an international world. Because there's no reason why these kinds of events that are happening tonight couldn't become part of, stretch out to an international audience, as well as just becoming part and parcel of the vocabulary of how people think about remembrance. For so long, theater for some reason has been a little bit outside the central issues of the way people have taught or remembered the Holocaust. And I think now it may be just the appropriate time.
I think it is.
And to your point, the theater artists that I am part of, because I've devoted my entire life to the theater and I know them virtually in all parts of the world, are so giving and caring as a breed that if they are asked and called upon to try to participate in this kind of an effort, collaborating with organizations, I know so many of them who've already decided that they want to do this and are doing it. Tonight at Lincoln Center, we had Ed Asner and Jane Atkinson, who most of you saw in Homeland, and Donald Curran, and a young actress who's in The Humans, all working together just so that they could do this with Asner flying across the country to do this one reading for one night and flying back tomorrow. Now, if 86-year-old Ed Asner can set that example and make us all proud of that interest and commitment, I think we could start a real effort here to have the arts and Holocaust remembrance organizations collaborating so that the reinforcement of both audiences and all that talent and intellect can be brought together.
And as you weren't here when I said it earlier, but everybody that worked tonight as actors, including students and professional actors, and our directors and playwrights are all volunteers for this event tonight, and they all did such a terrific job with such a generous heart. On that note, I'm just going to ask you, please, look on your computers, I guess on your phones, but it'll be kind of small. And please go to rememberwomen.org and see our resource handbook. It's very easy to find from the homepage of rememberwomen.org. I thank you so much for coming. And we have some refreshments if you go out and a little bit to the left. Thank you.